The morning sun was just rising over New Haven when the first alien ship appeared in the sky. Jenny Martinez was hanging wet clothes on the line behind her house when she saw the dark shape moving through the clouds. At first, she thought it might be one of the supply ships from Earth. They were not due for another month. But sometimes schedules changed. Then she saw the second ship, and the third. Jenny dropped the wet shirt she was holding and ran toward the house. Her husband Carlos was already standing on the porch, holding his hunting rifle. His face was hard and serious. Behind him, their two children, Jake and Lucy, stood in the doorway. Jake was 16 and tall, like his father. Lucy was 12, and had her mother's quick dark eyes. "Get inside," Carlos told his wife. "Get the emergency radio. Call Captain Rivers." The alien ships were getting closer now. Jenny could see they were not like any human ships she had ever seen. They were long and curved, like giant metal snakes. Strange lights blinked along their sides. The ships made no sound as they moved. Through the air, all around the small farming colony, people were coming out of their houses. Some carried guns. Others just stood and stared at the sky. Most of the 200 people who lived in New Haven had never seen alien ships before. They had heard stories. But stories were different from seeing the real thing. Captain Dan Rivers was already running through the main street. He had been a soldier before coming to New Haven 5 years ago. He knew what those ships meant. He was shouting orders to anyone who would listen. "Get to the school building. Bring your children. Move now." Dr. Helen Stone was standing outside the medical center with her bag in her hand. She was the colony's doctor and scientist. She had studied alien technology back on Earth, but only from books and old recordings. Now she was seeing it with her own eyes. And she felt afraid. The first alien ship landed in the center of the colony, right in the main square. It touched down without making any noise at all. The other ships spread out and landed around the edges of the settlement. Dust swirled up from their landing thrusters. For a few minutes, nothing happened. The ships just sat there, silent and waiting. The colonists gathered in small groups, whispering to each other. Some of the men held their guns ready. The women held their children close. Then the doors opened. The creatures that came out were unlike anything the humans had ever seen. They walked on two legs like humans, but they were taller and thinner. Their skin was covered in small dark scales that caught the morning light. Their heads were long and narrow, with yellow eyes that moved independently of each other. When they opened their mouths, the humans could see rows of sharp teeth. Captain Vexthak was the leader of the raiding party. He had done this many times before, on many different worlds. Usually the primitive creatures they found would run away screaming, or they would fall to their knees and beg. These humans were different. They stood their ground and looked ready to fight. This made Vexthak curious. Most species they raided were herbivores, plant-eaters, who had never developed fighting instincts. But these humans had something in their eyes that he had not seen before. It was the look of creatures who knew how to hunt. "Surrender your young ones," Vexthak called out in broken human language. His translator device made his voice sound metallic and strange. "We take them for work. Fight, you live." Captain Rivers stepped forward. His rifle was pointed at the alien leader. "You're not taking anyone. Leave now, or we'll make you leave." Vexthak made a sound that might have been laughter.
"Oh."
His soldiers spread out behind him. There were at least 50 of them, all carrying energy weapons that hummed with power. The humans had maybe 30 people with guns. Most of those were old hunting rifles. But the humans did not back down. The fight started when one of the alien soldiers grabbed Amy Chen, a 13-year-old girl who was standing too close to the alien landing zone. Amy's father, Dr. Ben Chen, shouted and ran toward his daughter. The alien raised his weapon to stop him. Carlos Martinez shot first. His hunting rifle cracked loud in the morning air. The energy bolt from the alien weapon missed Dr. Chen and hit the ground, leaving a smoking hole in the dirt. Then everyone was shooting and running and shouting. The aliens had better weapons, but the humans knew their own territory. They used the buildings and fences for cover. They moved in ways that confused the aliens, who were used to fighting creatures that ran in straight lines. Jake Martinez. found himself separated from his family in the chaos. He had his father's backup rifle, and he knew how to use it. He had been hunting since he was 10 years old, but shooting animals was different from shooting at thinking creatures who shot back. He saw his sister Lucy hiding behind the water tank near their house. 3 alien soldiers were moving toward her position. Jake did not think about being afraid. He just moved, running low and fast, using the chicken coop and the storage shed for cover. The aliens were good fighters, but they fought like soldiers. Jake fought like someone protecting his family. There was a difference. Dr. Stone was trying to get the younger children to safety when she saw something that made her stop and stare. Little Pete Johnson, who was only 7 years old, was not crying or running away like the other small children. He was watching the aliens with the same focused attention that he used when he was tracking rabbits in the woods. That was when she realized something important. These children were not like the alien young ones. They were not helpless. They'd grown up on a world that was trying to kill them every day. They had learned to survive before they learned to read. The battle lasted for 2 hours. The humans fought harder than Vexdak had expected, but his soldiers had shields and energy weapons. Slowly, they pushed the colonists back. One by one, the human defenders fell or ran out of ammunition. In the end, the aliens won. But it cost them more than they had planned. They had lost 12 soldiers, and many more were wounded. Captain Vexak looked at the human settlement and felt something he had never felt before during a raid. Respect. When the fighting was over, the aliens began gathering the children. It took 63 of them, from little 5-year-old Sarah Wilson up to 17-year-old Sophie Grant. The children did not cry or beg. They looked at their parents with steady eyes, as if they were saying goodbye before going hunting. Jake Martinez was pushed into the alien ship with his sister Lucy and their friends Connor Walsh and Amy Chen. As the ship lifted off, looked down at his father, who was wounded but still alive. Carlos Martinez looked back at his son and nodded once. It was the kind of nod that meant survive, learn, and come back strong. The alien ships disappeared into the sky, carrying the children away from the only home they had ever known. But Vexdak had made a mistake that would cost his people dearly. He thought he had captured prey animals. What he had actually done was take the young of the most dangerous predators in the galaxy and give them a reason to hunt. The inside of the alien ship was cold and dark. The walls were made of some kind of black metal that felt rough under Jake's fingers. Strange lights blinked in patterns that hurt his eyes if he looked at them too long. The air tasted wrong, like metal and something rotten. Jake sat with his back against the wall of the holding cell. Lucy was next to him, her small hand holding onto his arm. Around them, the other children from New Haven were crowded into similar cells. The youngest was little Sarah Wilson, only 5 years old. She should have been crying, but she was not. She was watching the alien guards with the same careful attention she used when watching her father fix broken farm equipment. The alien guards walked back and forth outside the cells. They were different from the soldiers who had attacked the colony. These ones were smaller and moved more nervously. Their scales were lighter in color, and they carried different weapons. Jake counted them. 6 guards for 63 children? That seemed like too few, but maybe the aliens thought human children were weak. Connor Walsh was in the cell across from Jake. He was only 8 years old, but he was big for his age. All the children in New Haven were bigger and stronger than children from Earth. Growing up on a frontier world made them that way. Connor was looking at the bars of his cell with interest, not fear. Amy Chen was whispering to Sophie Grant in the cell next to theirs. Amy was 13 and smart. Sophie was 17 and had been planning to go to university on Earth next year. Now she was here, but she did not look defeated. She looked like she was thinking Dr. Ziekmer was the alien scientist in charge of processing the new slaves. He had done this job for many years, cataloging thousands of creatures from dozens of worlds. But when he began examining the human children, he found things that confused him. First, their bones were much denser than they should be for creatures from a low-gravity world. Second, their muscle mass was far beyond what he expected from such young specimens. Third, their cardiovascular systems were designed for extreme physical stress. These were not the bodies of prey animals. Commander Vexthak, Dr. Zekmer, called over the ship's communication system. "I need to speak with you about these human younglings." Vexthak arrived at the holding area 20 minutes later. He was still angry about losing 12 soldiers. 2 primitive weapons. The humans had fought much harder than expected. Now his science officer was bothering him with questions about anatomy. "What is the problem, Doctor? These creatures are not what we thought they were. Look at these readings." Dr. Zekmer showed him the medical scans on his portable device. Their bone density is 3 times normal. Their reflexes are faster than adult Cathara warriors. Their brain activity patterns show constant tactical assessment of their environment. Vexthak looked at the children in their cells. They did seem unusually calm for captives. Most young creatures they took would be crying or trying to hide. These human younglings were watching and listening and learning. "They are from a death world," Vexthak said. "Of course they are different, but they are still just children." Jake had been listening to the aliens talk, did not understand their language, but he could hear the tone of their voices. The scientist sounded worried. The commander sounded annoyed. That meant they were having an argument about something, and arguments created opportunities. He looked around at the other children they were all listening to. Lucy was watching the guard patterns. Connor was still studying his cell bars. Amy and Sophie were whispering plans. Even little Sarah was paying attention to everything around her that night. When the ship's lights dimmed for the sleep cycle, Jake began to move. The aliens had made their first mistake by assuming human children needed the same amount of rest. As alien younglings, humans could stay awake and alert much longer than most species, especially when they were in danger. Jake carefully examined every part of his cell. The bars were strong, but the floor had a small drain grate. The walls had ventilation slots. The ceiling had access panels for maintenance. The aliens had built these cells for creatures who did not know how to look for weaknesses. In the cell. Across from him, Connor was doing something that should have been impossible. He was bending the bars of his cell, not breaking them, just bending them slowly and quietly. His face was red with effort, but the metal was moving. Lucy saw what Connor was doing and tapped Jake on the shoulder. She pointed to the ventilation slot near the floor of their cell. It was bigger than it looked. It's big enough for a small person to crawl through. Amy Chen had grown up fixing machines with her father. She understood how things worked. She had been studying the electronic lock on their cell door for hours. It was more advanced than anything on New Haven, but the basic principles were the same. Electricity flowed in patterns, and patterns could be changed. Sophie Grant was the oldest. The other children looked to her for leadership. She was smart enough to know that Jake had the most experience with hunting and survival. She caught his attention and nodded toward the guards. 2 of them were sleeping. The other 4 were playing some kind of game with small glowing objects. Pete Johnson was 7 years old and small even for his age. But growing up on New Haven had taught him how to move quietly and fit into small spaces. He had been exploring the ship through the ventilation system for the past 2 hours, while the aliens thought he was sleeping. When he came back to his cell, he whispered to the others about what he had seen. The ship had many levels. Most of the crew were sleeping. Important areas were guarded, but not very well. Aliens were confident that their prisoners were secure. Dr. Zekmer was having trouble sleeping. Something about the human children bothered him. He had studied the behavior patterns of hundreds of species, and these younglings were acting wrong. They were too calm, too observant, too organized. He got up and walked to the monitoring station. The security cameras showed the children in their cells. Most appeared to be sleeping, but something felt off. He switched between different camera views, trying to figure out what was wrong. Then he realized what it was. The children were sleeping in shifts. Some were resting while others stayed awake and watched. It was the behavior of pack hunters, not prey animals. Dr. Zekmar reached for the alarm button, but he was too late. Connor Walsh had finished bending his cell bars just enough to squeeze through. Amy Chen had figured out how to short-circuit her electronic lock. Lucy Martinez was already crawling through the ventilation system. and Jake Martinez was moving through the shadows toward the guard station with the focused patience of a predator who had learned to hunt before he learned to walk. The Cathara had spent millions of years evolving as herbivores on a world with few natural predators. They'd never developed the instincts needed to recognize when they were being hunted by creatures who had evolved on a planet that tried to kill them every single day. The human children were about to teach them what it meant to be prey. Captain Dan Rivers stood in the ruins of the New Haven Colony Center, his wounded arm hanging in a makeshift sling. Around him, the other survivors were cleaning up the damage from the alien attack, but Dan was not thinking about repairs. He was thinking about the 63 children who had been taken from their homes. "How many ships do we have that can still fly?" he asked Dr. Helen Stone. Helen looked up from her medical supplies. She had been treating the wounded colonists for 3 hours, but her mind was also on other things. 2 colony ships are still working. The mining shuttle has some damage, but Bill thinks he can fix it. The cargo hauler lost its main engine, but the backup systems are good. Don nodded. "That's enough to start with." "What about weapons?" "We have hunting rifles and some mining explosives. Not much against alien technology." "Maybe not," Dan said. "But we have something they don't expect. Have angry parents." Carlos Martinez walked over to them. His face was bandaged where an alien energy weapon had burned him, but his eyes were hard and determined. "My children are on that ship. I'm going after them." "We all are," Dan replied. "But we need to be smart about this. We can't just chase after them with hunting rifles and hope for the best." Helen was already working on that problem. She had found pieces of alien equipment scattered around the colony where the raiders had been careless. Energy weapon parts, communication devices, and something that looked like a navigation computer. She was not an engineer, but she had studied alien technology in school. "I think I can figure out how their faster-than-light travel works," she said. "If I can crack their navigation system, we might be able to track where they went." "We're colonists. We're gathering around them." Ben Chen, Amy's father, was there with his medical scanner. Bill Roberts, the colony's mechanic, was holding a toolbox and looking angry. Sarah Wilson's mother, Lisa, was carrying her late husband's military medals. Tom Grant, Sophie's father, had his old army uniform on. These were not soldiers. They were farmers and doctors and teachers and mechanics, but they were also parents whose children had been stolen, and that made them dangerous in ways the aliens could not understand. "We need to turn our colony ships into warships," Dan said. "Bill, can you mount the mining lasers on the outside of the hulls?" "I can try," Bill answered. "Won't be pretty, but it might work." "Helen, how long do you need to crack their navigation system?" "Give me 2 days, maybe 3. The alien computer language is different from ours, but mathematics is the same everywhere." Dan looked around at the faces of the other parents. They were scared, but they were also determined. "All right, we have 3 days to get ready. Then we go get our children back." The work began immediately. Bill Roberts and his team started taking apart the mining equipment and figuring out how to attach the laser cutters to the colony ships. The mining lasers were designed to cut through solid rock, so they should work on alien ship hulls. Helen Stone worked with Dr. Ben Chen to understand the alien technology. They found that the energy weapons worked on principles similar to human plasma cutters, but much more advanced. The communication devices used quantum entanglement, which was something humans had only theoretical knowledge about. "These aliens are more advanced than us," Helen said. "But they're not smarter. They just had more time to develop their technology." Lisa Wilson was organizing the other survivors. Colonists who were not working on weapons or technology were gathering supplies for the rescue mission. Food, water, medical supplies, and everything else they would need for a long journey through space. Tom Grant was studying the tactical information they had gathered during the attack. As a former military officer, he understood how to analyze enemy capabilities and weaknesses. "They're good fighters," he told Dan. "But they fight like they're used to enemies who run away. They don't know how to handle opponents who fight back hard." "What about their ships?" Don asked. "Learned. Good shields. But I noticed something during the attack. When Carlos shot that first alien, they all stopped and looked around like they were confused. I think they're not used to being shot at." Meanwhile, Word was spreading to the other human colonies. The quantum radio was still working, and Helen had managed to send messages to Earth and the other frontier settlements. The response was immediate and angry. Captain Maria Santos of the cargo ship New Horizon was the first to respond. "We're 3 days out from New Haven. Hold position. We're coming to help." The mining colony at Kepler Station sent a message saying they were loading their industrial ships with mining equipment that could be used as weapons. The research station at Wolf 359 was preparing their fastest scout ship to join the search. But the most important message came from Earth itself. Admiral John Hayes of the Colonial Defense Force sent a coded transmission. "Understand your situation. Official policy prevents military intervention in civilian matter. Unofficial policy says, go get your kids back. You have our support." Stone finally cracked the alien navigation system on the 3rd day. The mathematics were complex, but she found the tracking signatures that showed where the alien ships had gone. They went to a system called Vex Mora, she told the others. It's about 2 weeks away at maximum speed. There are 3 planets there, and 1 large space station. "That's where they're taking our children," Dan said. "That's where we're going." The colonists had transformed their peaceful farming settlement into a military base in just 3 days. The 2 colony ships now had mining lasers mounted on their hulls like weapons. The cargo holds were filled with makeshift missiles made from mining explosives. The crews were farmers and mechanics who had learned to be soldiers. Captain Dan Rivers stood on the bridge of the New Dawn, the lead colony ship. Around him were people who had never been in a space battle before, but who were ready to fight the entire galaxy, if necessary, to get their children back. "Are we ready?" he asked. Carlos Martinez was at the weapons station, learning how to use the mining laser targeting system. "Ready?" Lynn Stone was at the science station, studying the alien technology they had captured. "Ready?" Bill Roberts was in the engine room, making sure the colony ship's engines could handle the stress of combat. "Ready?" Tom Grant was at the tactical station, planning their approach to the alien system. "Ready." Dan activated the ship's communication system. "All ships, this is New Dawn. We're going to get our children back. The aliens think they took helpless prey animals. They're about to learn that human children are the young of the most dangerous predators in the galaxy." The small fleet of converted colony ships and mining vessels left New Haven and jumped into hyperspace. Behind them, the damaged colony continued to receive messages from other human settlements. Ships were coming from a dozen different worlds. Word was spreading through human space like wildfire. The aliens had made a mistake that would change the balance of power in the galaxy. They had attacked human children, and now they were going to face the fury of an entire species that had evolved to protect their young at any cost. The hunt had begun. Captain Vextic was having the worst week of his life. 3 days ago, his crew had begun reporting strange problems all over the ship. Food storage units were being opened during the night shift. Ventilation systems were making odd noises. Security cameras were showing empty corridors when guards swore they had seen movement at first. He thought his crew was being lazy or scared. The Cathara were herbivores by evolution. They were not used to feeling like prey animals. But now, Vextic was beginning to understand that something was very wrong on his ship. The human children had been too. Quiet for too long, Dr. Zeekmer rushed onto the bridge, his scales pale with fear. "Commander, we have a serious problem. I just checked the holding cells. 12 of the human younglings are missing." "Missing?" Vextic's voice was sharp. "How can they be missing? The cells are secure. The locks were bypassed. The ventilation grates were removed from the inside, and Commander... Zeekmer paused, afraid to continue. "What, 3 of my guards are also missing?" Vextic felt something cold move through his stomach. Guards did not just disappear. Send security teams to search the ship. Find those human younglings now. But Jake Martinez and his friends were not hiding. They were hunting. Jake moved through the ship's maintenance tunnels like a ghost. Behind him, Lucy crawled through spaces barely wide enough for her small body. Above them, Connor Walsh was working his way through the upper ventilation system. The ship was large, but it was built for creatures who were much bigger than human children. They had been studying the ship for 3 days. They knew where the guards went on their patrols. They knew when the crew changed shifts, knew which areas were watched and which areas were not. Most importantly, they knew that the aliens were not used to being hunted. Amy Chen was in the SCE. Ship's computer center, working on the systems that controlled life support and artificial gravity. She had learned about computers from her father, and alien technology was not as different from human technology as it looked. The basic principles were the same. Find the power source, understand the control systems, and look for weaknesses. Sophie. Grant was coordinating everything from her position near the main engine room. At 17, she was the oldest and had the most leadership experience from helping her father run the colony. She used hand signals and whispered codes to direct the other children through their tasks. The aliens had made a critical mistake. They thought like herbivores, creatures who ran away from danger. They did not understand how predators thought, how they planned and worked together and waited for the perfect moment to strike. Little Pete Johnson was the key to their plan. At 7 years old, he was small enough to go anywhere in the ship, could crawl through spaces at the aliens. Never thought to guard. He had already disabled 6 security cameras and planted small devices that Amy had made from broken alien equipment. The first alien guard disappeared during the night shift. His name was Kelvar, and he was walking his normal patrol route through the lower decks when something grabbed him from behind. He tried to call for help, but his communication device had been jammed by one of Amy's electronic devices. When the other guards found him 3 hours later, he was tied up in a storage closet with human bootlaces. He was alive but unconscious. On his forehead, someone had drawn a small mark with food coloring. It looked like a human letter X. The second guard vanished 2 days later. This time, the security cameras caught part of what happened. The recording showed the guard walking down a corridor. Then the lights went out for exactly 12 seconds. When the lights came back on, the guard was gone. The third guard was found hanging upside down in the ship's garbage disposal unit. He was not hurt, just very scared and covered in alien food waste. The same X mark was drawn on his forehead. Captain Vextek gathered his remaining crew in the main meeting room. Everyone was nervous. The ship felt different now, like it was full of invisible enemies who could strike at any time. "These are just younglings," Vextek said, trying to sound confident. "Small, primitive creatures. You cannot threaten trained Kithara warriors." But even as he spoke, the lights in the meeting room began to flicker. The air circulation system made strange whistling sounds. And somewhere in the walls, they could hear small footsteps moving just out of sight. Jake Martinez was listening to everything through the ventilation system above the meeting room. He understood enough of the alien language now to know that they were scared. Good. Scared enemies made mistakes. He made a soft clicking sound with his tongue. It was a signal. Lucy had taught him based on the way they communicated during hunting trips back home. Throughout the ship, the other children heard the signal and began the next phase of their plan. Amy. Chen activated the devices she had planted throughout the ship's computer systems. The artificial gravity fluctuated, making some areas too light and others too heavy. The temperature controls began cycling between hot and cold. The automatic doors started opening and closing randomly. Connor Walsh had been working on the ship's water recycling system. He did not break it, but he changed it so that all the water now tasted like the soap they used to wash clothes back. On New Haven, it was not dangerous, but it was very unpleasant. Sophie Grant had found the ship's food storage area. Did not poison the food, because that would be wrong. Instead, she added spices and flavorings from the ship's own supplies, creating combinations that were safe but tasted terrible to alien palates. The psychological warfare was working. The Kithara crew was becoming more and more nervous. They jumped at shadows. They were afraid to go anywhere alone. They stopped sleeping well because they were always listening for strange sounds in the walls. Dr. Ziekmer was the first to understand what was really happening. "Commander," he said during an emergency meeting, "these human younglings are not trying to escape. They are hunting us." "That's impossible," Vexak replied. They are children. They are prisoners. No, Dr. Zeekmer said quietly. We are the prisoners now. They're the ones in control of this ship. As if to prove his point, all the lights in the room suddenly went out. In the darkness, they could hear quiet laughter echoing through the dud. Ventilation system. When the lights came back on 30 seconds later, someone had written a message on the wall in the alien script, "We are coming." The Cathera had spent their entire evolutionary history as herbivores. They were good at running away and hiding from predators, but they had never learned how to fight back against intelligent hunters. Now they were trapped on their own ship, with creatures who had evolved on a world where everything was trying to kill them. Jake Martinez smiled in the darkness of the maintenance tunnel. The aliens were learning what every creature on New Haven knew. When you threaten human children, you do not get prisoners. You get predators. Predators do not give up until they win. The human rescue fleet dropped out of hyperspace just as Jake Martinez was putting the final touches on his plan. Captain Dan Rivers stood on the bridge of the New Dawn, looking at the alien space station that hung in the darkness ahead of them. It was huge, bigger than any human structure he had ever seen. "Are you picking up the tracking signal from the children?" Don asked Helen Stone. Helen was working at her science station, using the alien technology they had captured. "Yes, I'm getting a signal from the bone render. It's docked at the space station, but something's wrong with their systems. Their communications are down, and their engines are offline." "Weapons malfunction?" asked Carlos Martinez from the weapons station. "No," Helen said, studying her readings more carefully. "It looks like their entire ship has been systematically disabled from the inside." On the bridge of the bone render, Captain Vextak was trying very hard not to panic. His ship was dead in space. Half his crew was hiding in the emergency shelter because they were too afraid to walk the corridors alone. The other half was tied up in various storage compartments throughout the ship. The human children had taken control of everything. Jake Martinez walked onto the bridge like he owned the place. Behind him came Lucy, Connor, Amy, Sophie, and little Pete Johnson. The other children were spread throughout the ship, making sure the alien crew stayed where they had been put. "Hello, Captain," Jake said in the alien language he had learned over the past week. "We need to talk." Vextik looked at the 16-year-old human boy and felt something he had never experienced before. Fear of a creature smaller than himself. "What do you want?" "We want to go home, Sophie," Grant said. She was holding an alien energy weapon that she had taken from one of the guards. "And we want you to understand something important." Amy Chen was at the ship's communication station, working with equipment that was more advanced than anything she had seen before. But the basic principles were the same as the radios back on New Haven. "I'm sending a message to our parents. They should be here soon." "Your parents?" Vexthok felt his scales turn pale. "How could they possibly find us?" "Their human parents?" Connor Walsh said simply. "You took their children. Do you really think they would just stay home and be sad?" Outside the alien ship, Captain Dan Rivers was coordinating the approach of his makeshift fleet. The New Dawn, the mining vessel, Iron Will, and the cargo hauler, Second Chance, moved toward the space station in formation. Behind them came the ships. From other human colonies that had joined the rescue mission, "This is Captain Rivers of the human colony ship New Dawn. Dawn broadcast on all frequencies. We're here for our children. Return them immediately, and no one gets hurt." The response came from the space station itself. The alien commander there, Admiral Gexion, was confused and angry. "This is a Cathara facility. You have no authority here. Leave immediately, or we will destroy you." "No," Don replied. "You will not." To prove his point, Bill Roberts fired the New Dawn's mining laser at a small asteroid near the space station. The rock exploded into dust and glowing fragments. The message was clear. The humans had weapons, and they knew how to use them. On the bone render. Jake was explaining the facts of life to Captain Vexthak. "Your people made a mistake," he said. "You thought we were prey animals because we live on farms and go to school and play games, but you did not understand something important about humans." "What?" Vexthak asked. "We are all predators," Lucy Martinez said. "Even the children, especially the children." Pete Johnson, who was only 7 years old, was sitting in the captain's chair playing with alien control systems like they were toys. Our planet tried to kill us every day for millions of years, he said cheerfully. So we learned to kill it back. Amy Chen had finished setting up the communication system. New Dawn, this is Amy Chen, aboard the alien ship Bone Render. We have control of the vessel, and all crew members are secure. Request permission to come home. The voice that answered was her father's. Amy, is that you? Hi, Dad. We're all okay. We caught some aliens. Can we keep them? Admiral Gekshin was learning that his space station's weapon systems were not working properly. Every time he tried to target the human ships, his targeting computers showed error messages. His communications were being jammed by signals coming from his own detention levels. What is happening? He demanded of his technical staff. Sir, the human younglings we have in detention appear to have taken control of our computer systems. They are blocking our weapons and communications. The Admiral stared at his technician. The younglings did what? Down in the detention levels? 15-year-old Mike Wilson was teaching the other human children how to reprogram alien computer systems. It was not much different from the farm equipment computers back home, just more complex. But humans were very good at figuring out how machines worked. The key is understanding that all computer languages are based on logic. Mike explained to 8-year-old Katie Roberts. Once you understand the logic, you can change the commands. Katie nodded seriously. She was too young to understand programming, but she was old enough to follow simple instructions. So if I press these buttons in this order, their defense shields turn off? That's right, but only do it when I tell you to. Captain Dan Rivers was amazed by what he was seeing. The entire Cathara space station was being disabled by human children who had never seen alien technology before a week ago. They were learning faster than anyone thought possible. All human vessels, this is Jake Martinez aboard the Bone Render. We have secured this ship and are ready for pickup. Also, we have some information about the alien slave trade that you might find interesting. 6 hours later, the human fleet was preparing to leave the Vexmora system. All 63 children were safe aboard the rescue ships. The Bone Render was being towed by the New Dawn, and its crew was in the cargo hold under guard. Captain Vextex sat in a detention cell that had been designed for humans. It was too small for his larger body, but the humans did not seem concerned about his comfort. Jake Martinez came to visit him before they left. Your people need to understand something, Jake said. Humans do not make good slaves. We do not run away from fights. We do not forget when someone hurts our families. And we do not forgive when someone takes our children. What will happen to us? Vexthuk asked. You will be returned to your people with a message. The message is simple. Stay away from human space. Stay away from human colonies. And never, ever take human children again. Dr. Helen Stone had spent the past 6 hours studying Cathara technology and interrogating their prisoners. What she learned would change everything humans knew about the galaxy. The Cathara are not the only slave traders, she told Captain Rivers. There are dozens of species that raid primitive worlds for workers. They have been doing it for thousands of years. Not anymore, Dan said. Word is going to spread about what happened here. Every species in the galaxy is going to know that human children are not victims. They are the young of apex predators. The trip home took 2 weeks. During that time, the human children taught their parents everything they had learned about alien technology. They also taught them something more important, that human beings were much more dangerous than anyone in the galaxy realized when they reached New Haven. They found that the colony had been rebuilt and reinforced. Ships from Earth and a dozen other human worlds were orbiting the planet. The news of the rescue mission had spread through human space like wildfire. Jake Martinez stood with his family outside their new house, looking up at the ships in orbit. His father put a hand on his shoulder. Are you okay, son? Jake thought about the question. A week ago, he had been a farm boy who went to school and helped with chores. Now he was someone who had taken control of an alien warship and taught a species of slave traders to fear human children. I'm fine, Dad, but I think the galaxy is going to be different now. Carlos Martinez nodded. Good different or bad different? For us, good different. For anyone who tries to hurt human families, Jake smiled, and for just a moment, Carlos could see the predator that lived inside his teenage son. Very bad different. Galaxy had learned a lesson that would be remembered for generations. Humans were not the weak, primitive species that everyone thought they were. They were the descendants of apex predators, and their children carried that legacy in their blood. The age of human expansion into the galaxy had begun. And it would be built on a simple principle. You could fight humans. You could compete with humans. You could even defeat humans. But you never, ever touched their young. Because that was... When humans stopped being civilized and remembered what they really were,